Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a boy named David. He was intelligent, hardworking, and always carried big dreams in his heart. But there was one habit he could never shake off. He talked too much about his dreams. Whenever he learned something new, he couldn't keep it to himself. He would announce his plans to everyone, whether it was about his studies, his ambitions, or personal goals. He believed that by sharing his dreams, he would motivate himself and others, finding strength in the praise he received from friends, the pride his family felt, and the encouragement from his teachers. But each word David spoke seemed to drain his energy, as if the more he spoke, the less he did. Those compliments and attention he craved didn't help him achieve his dreams. On the contrary, they gave him a false sense of accomplishment, a fleeting relief, as though he had already made progress. Yet, when he looked at his life, he realized everything remained the same. His words, endless and empty, only created a void where his dreams should have been. He could see the faces of those who admired him, but in the quiet of his own heart, David knew none of it had brought him closer to his goals. He was drowning in his own words, while reality, cold and indifferent, slipped further away. One day, David encountered an elderly man, known as Guruji, in the town temple. Guruji had observed David many times, always speaking about his future without ever taking action. That day, the old man called David over and, with a wise gaze, asked, "Son, you talk constantly about your dreams, but have you ever achieved any of them?" David hesitated. He had set numerous goals, yet very little had been accomplished. "I try my best, Guruji, but things don't seem to go as planned," he replied, his voice tinged with frustration. Guruji, smiling gently, said, "Let me tell you a story that might help you understand why this happens." Long ago, in a distant village, there lived a poor but hard-working farmer named Dev. Dev had a dream of owning a large farm filled with crops. Every day, he worked relentlessly, saving every penny he could. However, there was one thing Dev always followed. He never spoke about his goals. Whenever people in the village asked him what he was working so hard for, he would simply smile and say, "You'll see, when the time is right." Years passed, and slowly but surely, Dev began buying small pieces of land, planting crops, expanding his farm, and eventually building a beautiful house. The villagers, who had once doubted him, were now in awe of what he had achieved. One day, an old friend visited Dev and asked, "Why didn't you ever talk about your plans, Dev?" Dev responded with a calm smile, "When you talk too much about your dreams, two things happen. First, people tend to discourage you. Second, your energy is wasted in talking instead of working. Silence protects your goals. Words are like arrows. Once they are released, they can never return. I chose to let my success speak for itself." Listening to Guruji's story, David sat in deep contemplation. Guruji continued, "Son, when you speak too much about your goals, two things occur. First, people may not always wish you well. Not everyone will be happy for your success. And second, the excitement you feel about your goal fades away when you talk about it. Your mind believes that by talking about it, you've already achieved it, and the motivation to work for it dissipates." David understood, for the first time, why his plans had never come to fruition. He had been expending his energy on words rather than focusing on actions. "Can I change myself, Guruji?" David asked, genuinely seeking guidance. Guruji smiled warmly and replied, "Of course. From today, speak less and act more. Let your success make the noise, not your words. Remember, silence is powerful." From that day on, David made a firm commitment to change. He stopped talking about his dreams and began focusing entirely on his actions. He immersed himself in his work, studying harder than ever, working relentlessly toward his goals, and taking every opportunity to learn. David no longer sought validation or praise from others. He understood that true progress comes from within, not from the attention of others. As months passed, David's transformation was undeniable. His discipline and dedication bore fruit. He no longer wasted time discussing his plans. Instead, he worked quietly, steadily making progress toward his dreams. The distractions of idle chatter faded, and with each small achievement, his confidence grew. The satisfaction of seeing his hard work yield results replaced the fleeting thrill of approval from others. David had discovered the power of silence. and it fueled him to push forward even more. When the results of his final exams were announced, David stood at the top of his class. His peers were astonished at how he had changed, how his quiet determination had led him to succeed when others had expected him to falter. Friends who once mocked his lofty goals now stood in awe of his accomplishments. But David simply smiled. He knew it was the quiet dedication, not the noise, that had gotten him here. Years later, David became a successful entrepreneur. His company flourished, not because of loud boasts or grand speeches, but because of his relentless pursuit of excellence. He had built his empire from the ground up, always choosing to act rather than speak. His reputation was now built on the solid foundation of his work ethic and his results, not empty promises. David's story became an inspiration to others, proving that true success doesn't come from talking about what you plan to do, but from actually doing it. He had achieved everything he once dreamed of and more. And as he looked at the life he had built, David understood the true meaning of success. It was the quiet, determined work that speaks louder than any words ever could.